What is going on, everybody? I am back with another AMA Ask Me Anything about my travel series, and let's get right into it. So today's topic, we had a question from Eric LaRoche. We talked a lot about hard travel versus easy travel when I was with him, and I thought I'd share a couple of things about what I mean about hard travel, easy travel, and everything in between. So this is actually really interesting. I didn't know this before I even started looking this up. But the difference when we hear first world versus second world versus third world countries, it actually is a political statement, not economical, which was actually news to me. I didn't know this. But the first world actually meant from the NATO alliance, and the second world meaning from the Soviet bloc alliance. And then the third world was neither. So on the world stage, especially during the Cold War, there was the two major powers of the Soviet Union versus the US and NATO. And then there was the rest of the world, which actually at that point was very, very young. Well, still is very, very young. Most of the countries are very, very young. So I didn't know that, but those categories actually mean a political stance versus an economical stance. But for what we use third world countries for today usually means quite underdeveloped countries compared to the first world or even the second world, which is slightly more developed, especially with infrastructure, which leads us to today's topic of hard travel versus easy travel. So we'll start with easy travel. What's easy travel? Easy travel is when cultural differences aren't that extreme. Language barriers can be navigated around quite easily, and logistically, things are a bit easier. And my example for that would be Germany. Germany was a perfect example of easy travel, and really the Western part of Europe, the countries that make NATO or the first world, because the language also uses the Latin-based alphabet for the most part, and uses great transportation, so easy to move around. And really, English is spoken in most of Europe because they use it as a Libra Franca to so people don't have to learn French and German and Italian and all the dialects, as well as Dutch and everything else that's in every Italian, Spanish, all of that. Instead of doing that, they learn English, which makes it really easy for us. So we can buy bus and train tickets from our phone, show up, hop on, go to a different country, speak English in all those countries, and then culturally, we are European. Most of us come from European descent, so our cultural differences aren't that different either. Sure, there's the differences in food and all the things that we love so much, but it really isn't that different. So that's a good easy travel destination. So especially for you beginners out there, Europe is a really good spot to start because you won't be really drastically challenged in a place like Europe compared to other parts of the world. So that gives into hard travel. So those three categories is usually what I use to describe hard travel. Is the cultural differences, it's the logistics, and it's the language barrier. And the varying degrees of all three can give you different levels of hard travel. So I'll give you guys a couple of examples for Georgia. When we went to Georgia, which is just not the state, but the country, which is on the east side of the Black Sea, just under Russia, English was not really prominent outside of the capital city. So, because Russian was the second language, there was Georgian and then there was Russian. So, English, not so much. So, navigating those language barriers while dealing with a logistic system which was different from Europe, basically sitting on the side of the road, waving down a taxi and jumping on and hoping that we're going to the right situation or right city. It was the logistics. So that would be a little bit harder and would require a little bit different set of skills than, say, Europe, where you can just use your iPhone to get to where you want to go. And so how do you prepare for something like that, especially when you start getting into really developing, really young countries? Say something, people that haven't had a lot of time in their new country or that's been recently uncolonized or had civil war or whatever, that then everything is hard. Everything is hard. The cultural differences might be completely different. The logistics could be completely different. English might not be spoken, and they might not use the Latin alphabet. So you might have the trifecta of, wow, I have no basis to how to accomplish anything in this country. So how do you prepare for something like that? So I'm going to go over the general steps today, and then I'll try to break down these 3 steps in later episodes of the Ask Me Anything series. In the first one, we'll do the cultural differences. So the cultural differences is really tough because you can only prepare so much. Stereotypes are something that you can maybe look at and research online of maybe this culture does something like this. But even within a country, the regions, the cities, even the villages, the neighborhoods within a city might have their own different culture. I mean, just look at the US and how vastly different our cultures are within cities, within everything else. So there's only so much you can do to prepare for a hard travel cultural situation. And the one thing that really needs to be done is as soon as you get boots on the ground, you really have to mentally prepare yourself to be observant and really consciously decide to let go of the things that you already know. Because if you hold on to things like you think you know, then you'll have a lot of friction trying to integrate into a place where you already stand out quite a bit. And here's an example. One of my favorite examples of this would be how people line up for the grocery store, to get bus tickets, anything. So train stations, one of my favorite examples. We in the Western world line up. So there will be a queue, sometimes marked off. You wait in line, you wait for your turn, you go up, you buy your ticket, and you move on. That is not always the case. Sometimes it's just a mob at the front, and that's just how it is there, and that's how people get that done. So you could be standing in the back of the mob and never get a train ticket ever. So you can either be upset about that and try to wait your turn, or you really have to let that go and get in there and, fight the grandmas, start elbowing, try to slip your way up to the front and get your train ticket. Because, and no one's going to take that personally, because that's exactly what they do. So being observant is very key to everything, literally everything, to how people order food, to how people wait in line for food, to how people drive. Driving systems around the world are vastly different from our very straightforward wave courtesy Midwest feel. And really, boots on the ground, being observant from day one will help you a lot. And it takes a lot of trial and error. And unfortunately, you can't look up things beforehand. So that's a hard one. That's a hard one to start with. But like an earlier video, being observant, being curious, asking questions when you possibly can, if someone around you has lived there and spoken English, is the best case scenario. But if not, then you really got to figure it out on your own. But don't be afraid. You're more adaptable than you think. So don't just get in there and try it out. Number 2, you have to learn some very basic language skills. So this is good, especially beforehand. This is a little bit hard. This is one of the things that you can research before you hit the whatever country you're going to. And we'll get into the specifics of what words that you need to know in a later episode and break those down. But really, it's being able to say hello and just changes the dynamic from the very start of the interaction. People are much more friendly when you start with trying, even if it's an attempt, even if it's a terrible attempt, because I am terrible at pronunciating words in different languages. But even if I completely butchered something, especially if they don't speak English very well, it really opens up the gate of, hey, I'm trying to be friendly. I'm a foreigner, but I'm trying to do my best to not only respect you in the place where you live, but trying to communicate with you. And that really, really helps. So knowing some very basic language skills from hello, goodbye, thank you, it's a great place to start, and it will completely change your trip. So number 3, logistics. So logistics are also extremely challenging depending on the hardness level, I guess we'll say, of the country that you're going to, or just difference level of what it is. Because where countries that don't have the infrastructure we do, the people make the systems, which is phenomenal. It's actually one of my favorite things to witness when I go into a different country, is how the population solves problems by themselves without really any help. So when you walk into that situation, it's really hard also to look up these pseudo systems that the population then creates by themselves, because there's no real guidelines to it. And maybe a traveler has done it before and could post it, but you don't really know how it's changed, what's happened since that last post. So that's another thing where a good dose of beginning research and getting on the ground and actually trying to figure it out will help. So I guess another example would be the train station, where in Germany, Easy Travel, you can buy your tickets online. You hop on your right train. It has the number. It shows you when it leaves, when it's supposed to show up. You can show your ticket on your phone to the conductor. Perfect, done. In a place like Laos, where there's only buses and the buses show up kind of whenever they want, and you show up and no one's really speaking English. It doesn't really matter if you bought tickets before or after. Using the little bit of miming here and there, you can try to find the right person that sells you the right ticket to the right place, and maybe they'll have a sign in English, but really you should have the name of your town that you're trying to get to in the foreign language, and scripts that the Lao scripts or whatever scripts that you're in. So there's a lot of challenges. There's a ton of challenges both in research and the day of. And the best advice that I could give anybody that's facing a hard travel, transportation, logistics situation is to give yourself plenty of time. When you're moving, dedicate that day to moving. Make sure you get there plenty early, because things will just be different. You will not know how to navigate each and every place flawlessly. It's impossible. So make sure that you're there really, really early. Try to get as much information as you can. Try to triangulate if you can. Ask at least 3 people in different places when you're there, and use that research before. Know what you're getting into. What does this place look like? Where is it? How long does it take to get there? Can you walk there? What openings out there? Or have any travelers gone through there and had any pitfalls in certain regions? So really, this one is by far the hardest, and we'll do another in-depth video of logistics, but it's really a two-pronged attack of really trying to research in certain pitfalls and getting on the ground and trying to know the cadence of exploring, using those observation skills and trying to figure that shit out, because it's hard. That's why it's hard travel. So when you're moving, especially in a hard travel situation, it's like going to war in some ways, because you got to be on point, a military position. You got to be on and active. You can't get on the train and relax, because maybe the signs will outside of the window will be in Lao script, Thai script, and not in English. So who's going to be your ally to get you off? Maybe they won't be announcing the cities and stops as they go by. Those are all things that you have to worry about. So I would if you plan on going to quote unquote third world country, or a place that's still developing, I would try to get a couple trips under your belt just to know how you navigate those situations. So for beginners, Europe is a really wonderful place, because we have in alignment a lot of these 3 characteristics that really put the difficulty level of your trip higher, and then you can branch off into other things. And hopefully that doesn't scare people away from going to places like well, even Thailand's not that hard anymore, but a place like Laos or even some parts of Vietnam or some African countries, Middle Eastern countries, or some other developing nations, because there are a lot of hidden gems and wonderful trips that can be had there. But just know, get these three things down and you have a much better trip. So that is my time for today. Hopefully that gave you a little bit of insight on the hard versus the easy parts of travel and the three major things that really dictate hard versus easy. And if you're going into a zone that has major cultural differences, major logistical challenges, and a language barrier, make sure that you're preparing as much as you can, but also having a battle plan when you're there, because your plan will most likely go wrong and you're going to have to adapt on a dime. But that's travel. That's travel for you. And that's part of what makes it really, really fun, really, really frustrating, and a hell of a good experience. So thank you guys for listening. I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget the YouTube channel is live. There's a link in the description below. And also write all your comments for all your questions. If you have any questions about this episode, any future episodes, write them in the comments. I'll write them down. I'll try to make more videos about them so that you guys can get traveling. I can get all these thoughts out of my head and onto the web to help more people. And that's my time for today. So thank you all for listening, and I'll catch you next time. Have a good Monday. Bye.